learn the principles and train how to bring this into tantric awareness. Otherwise, we run the risk of chasing after our desires without a new level of awareness or intention, which will usually just strengthen our attachments, actually. So we also want to recognize that not all of our desires need to be or should be experienced. Just because a desire arises doesn't mean that we need to actually experience it. So we have to learn a level of discrimination and wisdom in terms of how we are working with these things. There are some desires that will be strong enough that they just have to be experienced. They have to express in this lifetime while we're in a body for us to be able to process it. But there are other desires that are probably not helpful to fully experience and express. But we still want to allow them into awareness enough to just accept them, to witness them, to notice that they're there, to let them be seen, and to bring them into awareness, even if we're not going to actually take action on them. So as just a general example, there are some times that desires arise or fantasies that might arrive that involve potential dangers or risks, or that might even be illegal. So anything that could harm others or self, we would want to just recognize that, like, we probably shouldn't do this. So we have to have that level of discriminating awareness, that it's not that anything that rises in our mind that we're just going to go chasing after it because it's there. There's still a level of discrimination and directing our awareness and our action and our energy. And so with that said, we also don't want to pretend that the idea didn't exist in our mind. It shouldn't be suppressed, even while we don't give a lot of energy to it. So we want to give this balanced awareness to our karmas and the desires that matter the most. That becomes the important part. The strongest motivations and ambitions, we're going to want to give them more attention, more awareness, more nurturing, and like nurture those seeds into awareness and let it express into the world. Things that we're less motivated by will need less attention. We might need to be present to it, but we also want to, not judge it and kind of just allow it to be something that moved through our awareness. And then there's some thoughts or desires that may not need more than just watching it pass through without any additional thought. So from this, we're wanting to be able to surrender to discover how these karmas wish to express, rather than one of the mistakes that we can make is trying to force our version of them into reality. Instead, we want to think of them like seeds, where it is this seed of desire that arises, and we're going to water it and nurture it. And, when you sprout a seed, literal seed, and you start to water it, like, you might know kind of what kind of plant you have put a seed in the ground. You might know that the acorn is going to become an oak tree, but you don't literally know the exact details and orientation that oak tree is going to take. You don't know where the branch is going to come off the trunk when it gets to be 20 years old, for instance. And so you're planting a seed, you kind of know where it's going, but you don't know exactly what it's going to look like as it starts to sprout. And so we have to be open to that part of the discovery of seeing how things show up. So the experience of this desire, how it shows up, what the final outcome or the goals look and feel like, are almost always at least a little different than we imagine them to be. And in many cases, they'll be drastically different than what we had originally imagined was going to happen. So instead of rigidly trying to force a specific outcome, we want to connect with the deeper desire, to honor it, to acknowledge our desire for whatever it is that is arising, and then open ourselves to allow it to manifest in the way that our higher wisdom or our divine wishes for it to happen, rather than just our mind coming up with an image, a story, and trying to force that into being. So in this way, we are more surrendered to what wants to express through us, becoming curious about what shows up and letting the path reveal itself step by step, which is an integral part of the tantric awareness, is allowing ourselves to be curious and to observe and to witness what's actually showing up, rather than trying to set an agenda and having expectations around what it should be, and telling stories about whether it's working or not working, et cetera, et cetera. We want to start freeing ourselves from that and just become more mindful of what's actually happening in the present moment. And that becomes part of the process. So we want to recognize that some of these desires are going to sprout also, and others are not. There are going to be times that you connect with something, and you nurture it and you bring it into awareness, and you may even feel the motivation to do it. And then sometimes the main reason that we explore that karmic desire is to realize ultimately that we don't want to do it. We may start down a path and be like, what am I doing here? And that becomes actually the gift and the healing. It's like you've tried it and now you're fully satisfied that like, this is not for me, and you let it go. But up to that point, there was some part of you that was like, that would be the thing. That'll be so cool if I have this thing. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute, this isn't going to be quite as great as I thought it was. I'm not going to really spend any more time on this. Or we may discover that we're just not passionate enough about it to pursue it, in which case the karmic removal ends in that honest awareness that we don't really want it. And so sometimes we will get what we desire, and then we'll realize that it isn't as fulfilling as we imagined. And so in this realm, there's a quote from the comic actor who I think no longer works at all, named Jim Carrey. And I think I'm getting the quote right. It may be slightly paraphrased, but I know that I have the gist of it correct. And so he was quoted, I think probably 15 or 20 years ago, as saying that he believes that everyone should have the opportunity to become rich and famous, because then they'll be able to realize that it's not the answer. That is not the solution to the happiness that we think. Because in our minds, there can be that part of us that thinks, if I had more money, if I had the car, if I had the girl, if I had the guy, the $1 million mansion, the success, the recognition, the fame, that if I had all those things, that I would actually be happy. But we can learn from someone like Jim Carrey and lots of other celebrities that are honest, that having that level of fame actually just brings new challenges. It doesn't necessarily solve the problems that we imagine that they're going to solve. And sure, you might have lots of money to be able to do what you want, but you're still not fulfilled in the way that you might imagine. That's not the thing that's going to shift it. And so sometimes the process of it coming into being is also going to have twists and turns, that your first steps are going to reveal new possibilities and paths that you didn't previously acknowledge. And that the full process becomes a path of discovery, leading you into an experience that looks nothing like what you imagined at all. And so, as mentioned, attachment is something that we're wanting to let go. We want to really be in the flow of this. So attachment to an outcome of what it looks like will oftentimes block the flow. We'll get in our way because we're trying to control it too much. We need to learn to step back and relax and just allow an unfolding of the experience of it. So for the things that we truly are passionate about, we want to hold strong to the desire and the vision, while also surrendering to the process of where it's taking us. And so in this, we want to recognize the process of pursuing these hopes and dreams is also going to accelerate our karmic purification process and the healing and our freedom when we're doing it with tantric awareness. Because in order for us to reach these higher ambitions and these higher vibrational experiences, we're going to be asked to recognize and to remove inner limitations that might be preventing us from actually experiencing it. If we're moving towards something, some new skill, some new level of success, some new level of happiness, then we're actually going to have to create some inner changes in order for that to happen. And so the process of facing that journey and creating those changes and growing is also part of the process as well. That refines our karmic purification and our karmas. And so we are asked in that process to face our desires and our ambitions, but in pursuing them, we have to face the experiences of frustration and fears and failures, as well as the successes that we might experience. So it really brings this whole new nuance to the journey of life that is fuller and more human and more vulnerable and more alive, but it allows us to connect with authentically who we are and what we're feeling and what we desire, and the real experiences of being human and putting ourselves out there in the world and taking risks. And so why this matters to us on a spiritual path is that when we do this with tantric awareness, our pursuit of our desires, our hopes and dreams become a conscious path to freedom and spiritual awakening. We truly begin to experience that the full experience that we're having is a spiritual process, that we dissolve the potential inner conflict between our spiritual path and our human experience. We allow for both our shadow, the dark parts of ourselves, as well as the light of our true self to become free and to be seen and integrated and experienced. We not only heal and remove our darkness through healing our past wounds and traumas, but we consciously release and unveil our light, our passions, our gifts, talents, and unique expressions into the world. And we become free to simply enjoy the journey and the experience of life itself as a reflection and an integral part of the spiritual awakening process. And so we come to experience a flow and surrender in this process rather than a pushing and a forcing. We gain freedom while losing attachment, and we come to have deep self-acceptance for all parts of ourselves, all of the warts and all, as they say. We become free from self-judgments, more fully alive. We invite deep growth and healing, and we experience the freedom of life lived from our higher potential and in alignment with our unique desires and expressions. And we're able to embrace and use the fullness of every aspect of our experience as a conscious spiritual practice that fuels healing and awakening. And so, like anything that we learn, we're shifting out of a previous way of being, previous mental habits, previous ideas, thoughts, beliefs. Like anything, when we start to learn to cultivate this experience of tantric awareness and how to integrate these pieces together into a seamless journey of transformation and awakening, it does take practice and refinement to deeply integrate the process. It's not usually something that people are going to get quickly and just master it overnight. We want to, I think of a lot of the practices that are taught as being like training wheels. We're sort of repeating over and over again some basic kinds of things until we start to get it in a more unconscious way, and it starts to become natural for us to be able to engage it. And so, of course, it can, like anything that we learn, it can be helpful to get some guidance when we're first working with these principles.